Today we are going to study about demographic components, processes and measurements. Last time we discussed about what is demography, what is its short historical background and so on. So let's move on towards our topic. So you can see the table here. Demographic components are birth, death and migration. Demographic processes are fertility, mortality and migration. And demographic measurements are fertility rates, mortality rates and migration rates. So we will discuss about these all in detail now. Let's move on to next slide. What are demographic components? We have already seen in the picture in the table that demographic components are birth, death and migration. So you can think about birth. Birth increases population size, whereas death decreases population size. In the same way, migration can either increase or decrease the population size. Migration can increase population in a place, whereas decrease in another place. So demographic components can be defined as those components or those elements which can cause population change. Demographic components can either increase or decrease the population. So you are clear, I think. So let's go to another slide. What are demographic processes then? You can see demographic processes are fertility, mortality and migration. They are the processes, demographic processes. They are not components. So look here, demographic processes are those elements. You can see the elements which cause birth, death and migration. So demographic processes cause birth, death and migration, or in other words, due to demographic process there can be birth, there can be death and there can be migration. So demographic processes are the factors which determine demographic components. So in this way we can see demographic processes. Now fertility, you can see the example. Fertility is a process, and this process, fertility, causes birth. Birth is component. Similarly, mortality is a process and mortality causes death. And due to migration process there will be the migration component. So in this way, demographic processes are those elements which cause birth, death and migration. So we can also say demographic processes are the causative agent or determining factor of birth, death and migration. So let's go to another slide. Last one is demographic measurements. So in demography we talk about different types of calculations by using different formulae. So here birth, death, migration or fertility, mortality, migration, they can be measured by using different calculation measures, different formulae. So look here, now demographic measurements are the processes of measuring different rates of demographic events and analyzing the different demographic statistics. So demographic components or events provide data or demographic statistics. So demographic components, which are also called birth, death and migration, they provide different demographic data for the calculation. The rates of demographic processes can be measured by using those data and other formulae. So the demographic rates can be measured. The rates of demographic processes can be measured by using the data obtained from demographic components, and it can be and the formulae can be used. Formulae, the singular is formula, the plural is formulae. Different formulae can be used. So in the same way, here in class 10 we will be discussing about different demographic measures. So there are different demographic measures. We will be talking in detail in the next slide. Now here is a table I have shown here. We will be reading about fertility measures. How can fertility be measured? There are different ways. Look here: CBR, GFR, ASFR, TFR. In these 4 ways we can measure fertility: by crude birth rate, GFR general fertility rate, ASFR age specific fertility rate, and TFR total fertility rate. In the same way, there are mortality measures: CDR crude death rate, ASDR age specific death rate, IMR infant mortality rate, and MMR maternal mortality ratio. These are the measures to measure mortality. Similarly, migration can be measured by IMR in migration rate, OMR out migration rate, NMR net migration rate, and GMR gross migration rate. Similarly, there are other measurements like RNI rate of natural increase, PGR population growth rate, PDT population doubling time, DR dependency ratio, and SR sex ratio. So in this way, in class 10, in next class we will be talking about all these measurements. Thank you.